always had a career in technology in some way, shape, or form. About 14 years of it running SAP's own data management program inside of SAP.
Tell me, what is a good strategy? What is a good data strategy? What is a bad one?
A good data strategy will have the end in mind and will have a path to get there and will include various types of capability. In a poor data strategy, we'll forget some of those basics and we'll just kind of be this, really fantastic looking, document.
What would you say is your number one advice to other data and AI leaders?
Make sure the work you're doing is relevant to the organization. Be transparent and communicate really well.
Hello, my data friends. It's great to see you back, and we have a wonderful guest today with us. It's Tina Rosario, who's the Chief Data Officer Europe at SAP. And she had a phenomenal career as a data leader, I think through many, many years now, in many different positions, and also working with companies around the world to help them to lead on data in their companies. And so I'm very pleased to welcome you, Tina, to our show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Welcome to the Data Masterclass podcast. And we will discuss the very relevant topic for all our listeners, which is about data strategy and transformational programs, how to get data strategies implemented, because I think that's the hard part, isn't it? But before we get it going, tell us a bit about your background, Tina. So I know we could probably talk an hour just about your background, but let's just highlight some things that you've been through.
I've always had a career in technology in some way, shape, or form. About 14 years of it running SAP's own data management program inside of SAP. And you might think, SAP, you're a tech company, you've got all kinds of resources, access to tools and capabilities, but in reality, we really needed a data strategy. We really needed to take a step back and focus on, how we wanted to drive change in the organization. And we were growing so fast back then. So it was a ton of fun to establish data governance, data quality management, all the things that you need to deliver good data out to your user community. And then about, maybe 5 years ago, I was given the opportunity to provide that same type of leadership and guidance to our SAP customers through a kind of trusted advisory role. And that's been really so much fun. I've met some wonderful people and have really tried to help other data leaders be successful. And it's a great job. I think I have the best job in the world. Next to yours, Alex, you have a pretty good job too as well. But I love what I do, and I'm so happy to be in the data space. This is such an exciting place to be, and it just keeps getting better and better each year.
Oh, yeah.
There's something new and something exciting, and
there's always something new in data. Well, and this is also how we met, actually. You actually mentored me for a while as part of this program, which I was very grateful for, because that was a very pivotal moment where we were setting up our our global strategy for data. And that was really, really great to have somebody so highly experienced as you, who has seen and done it before, all before. And also you've seen that also at so many different clients, because you can't, we all, as data leaders, you can only do 1 or 2 transformations every few years. But when you work with so many people, I think you see a lot.
And so many different industries, and so many different challenges. Organizational cultures are all different. Leaders are different. What they bring to the table is something different. So I think it's quite valuable to have an outside-in perspective, to have somebody who says, I've been in your shoes. Let me hold your hand for a little bit, or let me just be a sounding board. Sometimes I'll get people who, CDOs who will call me and they'll be like, how would you handle this? Or have you ever run across this problem before? And sometimes it can be just about, I'm having a tough time hiring staff, and, what are some good sources for data talent? It could also be, I'm having trouble with my technology with my installation and my usability. And so it really runs across all different facets, and I really enjoy it. And if I can ever do anything to help, I hope that I'm just, a phone call or a Zoom call away.
And I guess, one of the things that people often call you about is also, simply helping to communicate the value and a few messages to the leadership. Is that right? That's a key thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think sometimes we get caught up in our own bubbles, right? Our own data speak, and we forget that we have to translate that to an executive ear. And we have to take our 10, 15 KPIs. We're data people. We love to have metrics and we love to track improvements. But, to a board level, that's not what they want to hear. So it's oftentimes the exercise of simplification.
We have lake houses, we have data meshes, we have generative AI with different kind of algorithm architectures and things like that. And I think all of that is not so easy to explain. I mean, it's very complex, isn't it?
Right. I mean, we're also storytellers in the data world, right? We have to be able to translate these innovations, these trends, these buzzwords, as you mentioned, into examples that are going to resonate with the executives that they can relate to. And if we fail to do that, then we really fail to drive the programs, right? Because we aren't going to get the sponsorship and the attention that we need. One of the ways in which SAP got started on its own data journey was kind of around that, where some executives were super frustrated with the quality of data. After our first acquisition from an outside company into SAP, we brought aboard data without really thinking through, how do we manage duplicates? How do we handle some of these additional fields and constructs that come with this great rich data from the company that we acquired? And it became very difficult to manage until our executives said, we got to get our handle around this, right? We got to put some attention on this topic. So it didn't come from somebody, waking up in the middle of the night saying, I got to focus on data. I need a data strategy. It starts always with a business problem or some challenge or hopefully some executive, because I think that was a way in which, to get traction was when you have an executive who feels the pain, who says, I really need this, right? This is a real problem for me. This process is broken. This is an inability for me to be able to scale. This is, hindering my ability to drive costs down or to improve my operations or to grow my market share. Right.
To compete in the market, you see competitors doing something. Hey, you see, maybe my data is not helping me in doing what my competitors do because it's simply not at the state it should be.
Right. Or they run a report or they do some analysis and they look at the data and they're like, this can't be. this just can't be. Right. It's got to be better than this. And so they want to go back and sharpen the pencil. And so we should be right there beside them, right? And being able to, support and stand up for the data quality.
In fact, what you just told us, I think that is really a very common story. That actually a lot of data journeys also start by executives looking at KPIs and metrics and get frustrated because they're inconsistent. They're not representative of the real business or causing any other problems. When you want to do decision making. And that's very often a trigger. I heard that, I experienced that. I heard that from many other data leaders actually, because it's what what business executives have to work with every day. So they are, you have to work with KPIs and metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would never expect a business leader to be able to go deep into the data itself, right? They don't need to be experts in the data model or metadata, right? They just have to be able to articulate and communicate what their priorities are and what their needs and challenges are and then let us, right, let our data teams and our data leaders do the hard work, right? And we need to make that a bit more transparent, that we're not asking the business to take on the role of doing the actual data operations. We're asking them to be product owners, right? And we're asking them to take a leadership role. But I think we have to make it clear that there's an amount of work that needs to be done. And that amount of work requires, focused attention, budget, expertise, etc.
And sometimes some backing in
Yeah.
difficult
Yeah,
situations.
always backing. Can never have, too many sponsors and supporters.
Yeah, I think in particular in the data space, you need that.
Yeah.
I think more than in other places because it runs so much across the company.
I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges is that companies are often designed in silos of business processes, of lines of business, of, of different functions. But data is not, right? Data is, I heard someone say, it was actually a CFO say, data likes to be exposed and shared and spread around because it is a, corporate asset. And
Right.
it is not, data does not belong in one particular silo, right? It needs to be open to be shared, right? And I always like to say that the end goal for a data leader is for data to be consumable. So you want it to be useful and fit for the business. You want it also to be credible because you want the business to be able to trust and have confidence in what the data is saying and telling and giving them. And you want it to be consistent so that you can manage the cost so that you are able to repeat and to be able to reuse and to be able to structure the data in a way that's consistent as much as you can with some core elements that allow it to be consumed across the business.
So we're already deep into the discussion, but let's take a step back and tell us about one of the most interesting things you have seen, in data strategy programs. Tell us a nice story about one of the big things that you've personally experienced.
I think that, if you take a step back to your question, the construct of having a data strategy, there is no playbook or rule book, or at least there wasn't ever such a thing. And so leaders will say, oh yeah, I have a data strategy. I'm going to upgrade my systems and move my data from on-premise into the cloud. That's my strategy. Or, my data strategy is to put a lot of effort and bodies on data cleanup and build out a data operation. And that's my strategy. Versus really thinking about it from a holistic end-to-end perspective of all the various types of capabilities. I have one company that I've been supporting and guiding who, gets pretty frustrated because in his organization, data is only seen as a function of IT, not a function of the business. And that's huge. And I think that's oftentimes somewhat common. Is that, it's, this debate about, where does the data leadership and the data strategy and the data management capabilities, where do they belong? Do they belong in IT? Do they belong in the business? Where's the best fit in the home? And this is debated, I think, quite often still, particularly now with new technologies and new innovations coming in like AI that, tend to be more of an IT set of capabilities versus a business set of capabilities. And so, I work with them to kind of expand the thinking that, this doesn't just have to be an IT issue or an IT sponsored program, that, it can and should be much bigger than that.
So do you have maybe an experience where you've been through a data strategy implementation, data strategy, both in terms of crafting the data strategy, but then also implementation, where you say, hey, this was really nicely done. This was a good job.
I have an example. It's a smaller organization, which perhaps can be seen as a bit more manageable, but they really took the time to listen to the business. And I think to me, the most compelling and positive outcome was that the data strategy became an integrated part of the overall strategic plan for that company. That the leaders and the board members all agreed that in order for their objectives to be met, they needed to have a data strategy that fit hand in hand with what they were aiming to do as an overall business strategy and business approach. And they listened, and the data leader listened, and they jointly crafted a strategic plan for data and analytics. And they didn't, this is also another lesson learned, is that, they didn't just say this is our 5-year plan. They said this is our first year plan. And we're going to start somewhat simply, and we're going to build capabilities over time, and we're going to revisit in a year or so and see if we need to adjust and reprioritize. And I think that's a really great example. And that data leader has since stayed with the organization, because, we hear a lot of times, like, there's a lot of burnout, there's a lot of frustration, they weren't able to get things done, they weren't able to deliver on their promises, they weren't able to execute. And here, when you have this collaborative environment, and when you've been able to have joint agreements early on and make them manageable and meaningful, but also achievable, then I think that this leader in this case has then been able to stay with the organization, and he has adapted to, as well, as new things have come about. Their company has grown, they've made some acquisitions, they've gotten into some new markets, and he's been right there saying, okay, as the business strategy changes, I'm going to change and grow and adapt with it and stay relevant, which I think is a great lesson.
Well, I think you already now mentioned a number of things that are truly important in data strategies and their implementations. And I think, one of them was really, you want to make data part of your business strategy rather than something that is an add-on or something special in the IT, how we deal with data. It's more about, how does data contribute to the business, and what's our plan to make that happen. Yeah. And one thing that I've observed was that very often you need to earn that right to do so. So the journeys I've seen and I've been personally on was very often that you start with kind of use cases or first successes. Then you come up with a data strategy, and after a while you don't even need a data strategy, you have a business strategy, because people start to understand what it is and start to, the leadership starts to understand, and start to even take another leap and put that into the perspective of how can we make money out of it, or how can we reduce cost, or how can we strategically take advantage of data. Mm-hmm. But for that, of course, you as a data leader can influence business strategy, but at the end, it's the business leaders in the company that need to figure out, this is where I want to take my business. Mm-hmm. So you can inspire them by action and by maybe a data strategy, but very often it builds up, and then you know that you eventually made it when they start, if your business leadership starts to take over some of that data language, and beautifully unites it with the industry language you're in.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first place to start, is to really understand what are those business objectives, what are the strategic drivers for the company, and how do I then translate that into what data is required? Do I have that data? Is it trustworthy? Is it of good quality? Is it available? And shape the data capabilities and the data requirements to fit and nicely align with that business objective. And all you need is one good case. All you need is one strong use case, and start to deliver against that use case. And then people will say, wow, okay, right? There's something to this. I'm able to achieve my business objectives maybe faster, maybe with less effort, because the data is there as an enabler, right, for that business priority. And that's the first place to start. And I think one of the biggest challenges is that comes upon a data team is that there's so much noise, right? There's so many projects and opportunities, and I'm screaming over here and this one's over there. And refining that to what's most important and what's most relevant to the business strategies, and focusing the efforts around those types of projects. Maybe again, just pick one or two really critical use cases, build up some of the capabilities that are needed, and they're going to help those other projects too down the line, but are not going to get the sponsorship, the attention, right? The board level visibility, unless they're, part of the priorities and focus. So it's about understanding, what are the overall business goals and being relevant to those goals. To your point, Alex, where the two start to really blend together, and you don't have separate strategies, but you're working in tandem to drive the overall business strategy. And that's, to me, really, really critical. If you can get there, I think that's a great way. And that's something that, a new data leader coming into the organization might say, where do I get started? And I always say, okay, well, let's dissect the strategic plan. Let's go out there. Let's find it, right? Let's take a look at the long-term objectives. Let's take a look at where you think the business is heading. Let's listen to the CEO talking to the street, and let's listen to the feedback from the board, and let's break that down into products around data and analytics and now AI, and let's see where we can help and drive innovations and improvements to solve those business challenges and to help steer the business in the right way.
Yeah, and then related to all, the things that you mentioned before, like how the CEO talks about things and what is important. You want to be relevant with those products that you describe, and really, create that relationship between, hey, those are the products that will help you to drive this part or this element of your business strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me, what is a good strategy? What is a good data strategy? What is a bad one?
Well, I always think about understanding and defining what the end state is, right? And so good strategy will have the end in mind and will be able to easily articulate what the desired state is going to be and have a roadmap on how you get there. So it's not just words and PowerPoint slides, but it's actually project plans and resource needs and funding and technical capabilities. It's all those different components. So a good data strategy will have the end in mind and will have a path to get there and will include various types of capabilities. So it's not just about putting in a technology. It's not just about changing a business process, but it's all of those things, right? And so being comprehensive, but with just one particular use case or one or two in mind. I also think it's really, I've seen success where data teams will build a strategy that is very transformational, but yet at the same time, doesn't forget the foundational, and that the needs to do both. And this is, it's really difficult to have that balance there between, where the business is aiming to go strategically, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, whatnot, but also keeping the lights on and running the business as usual, and ensuring that business isn't hindered by lack of data or poor data or the inability to deliver analytics and insights, right? So I use this analogy of because I have a 14-year-old daughter who's getting to the age where she's quite anxious to drive. She doesn't like, the mommy Uber driving her around. So she's taking some early tests and starting to want to, get behind the wheel. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, what's going to happen when she wants to go on the highway and she wants to take the fast route, not necessarily the back streets or the simpler route. And I think about this in terms of, AI, like the executives are saying, oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to deliver AI. I need Gen AI. And yet I think about, okay, so if my daughter is to go on the highway, I've got to make sure that the car is safe, that the tire pressure's checked, that there's enough gas, that, she understands the rules of the road, that she buckles up her seatbelt, that the car is maintained. And that to me is this, I've got to get the foundation right. You're not going to put a car on the highway if it doesn't feel that that you're confident that that car is going to make it. And the same thing about new tech, right? And the same thing about some other new business priority. It's like, okay, we're going to get there, but at the same time, we've got to make sure that we get the basics right. We've got to make sure that it's safe, secure, right? Fits into our ecosystem, that we've set it up properly, that we've paid attention to the details, particularly around AI with ethics and unconscious bias, and doing what we can to make sure that there's good use of the data that's needed to train the AI models. And that is a bit of what I would call some foundational capabilities, right? Some of those basics. So a good data strategy covers both, right? It's innovation, and you want to drive new technologies, new capabilities, but you also can't not keep your foot on the gas, right? Not let go of the basics that are also just as important.
Well, and I think I think this is very, very essential. And at the same time, there are a few challenges in there. Let's face it, most data leaders that come in, they don't inherit a beautiful, well sorted out kingdom. Most of the time, it's quite a bit of a mess, and it's quite a bit of legacy. It's tech legacy, it's tech debt, it's data legacy, it's data debt, and you have to deal with that. And nobody wants to hear about these things, but you need to handle them. And I think that needs to be part of these crucial conversations, and maybe sometimes even confrontations, where you have to basically say, if we can do maybe something around, this use case, but if we don't at the same time start to fix some of these things, we will not come far. And I think those are some of these conversations that we have to have.
Poor data strategy will forget some of those basics, and will just kind of be this, really fantastic looking, right, document that gets the executives excited and maybe gets them some funding. But then you have the poor users, right, sitting in the business still, getting frustrated because they can't get access to the data that they need, or it's of poor quality. And, who's going to take care of that if it's not the data team, right?
Yes.
Thankfully, now we have some new capabilities to accelerate that a bit, right? So there's some more art and science that we can apply to some of those foundational requirements, which is great. We don't necessarily have to put a lot of bodies on it like we used to in the old days. But at the same time,
still painful.
Exactly. And it's the first thing you'd hear, right? If you went to the business and said, here's my, shiny new fast car that I'm going to put on the highway, and the business would be like, yeah, let me look under the hood of that car, because I can tell you that there's some, corrosion under there, or right. They'll be the first to point out that there's still some issues that need to be addressed. So a good data strategy needs to cover, all of that, right? It can't just be, siloed into one particular area, right? And it also, we've talked about this, but I also think it needs to be clear that it's important to be adaptable, right? So you can create the best data strategy that does cover, right, all the different capabilities, but you never know when a new leader is going to come on board and change the direction of the organization, or there's going to be perhaps some funding issues and budget cuts, and things need to be shifted and adjusted, or that there's some, new set of capabilities that you want to take advantage of that are going to, help shift the strategy and shift the priorities to enable you to deliver a little bit more earlier with a value proposition. So you need to be able to be, flexible and revisit that strategy, I think after 6 months, a year, and, take a look at those meaningful KPIs that you've put in and see if you're on track to deliver that value.
Yeah. And that is so important, because if you look at the tech stacks in data, they are changing so fast. And you might have a great BI tool that is the thing, the analytics tool or AI tooling that is sort of the thing of the day, but and everyone talks about it, and then 1 or 2 years later, it's almost obsolete, and you have another technology coming in. So I think that's, a crucial advantage. It's actually I think it's an overlooked strategic advantage of companies being able to adapt their data to any system that comes and plug and play with that. I think that is really, really important, because that helps you to adjust your whole business strategy. You can move your business faster.
In the worst case, you don't want a business leader coming and saying, okay, we want to move into this market, and then having the data team say, oh, data's not ready, or right, or
we need 3 years.
right, give me some more time, sort of a thing. It's like, no, you want to be able to be confident enough to stand up and say, yeah, we've got our metadata defined, we've got some standards in place, we've got a architecture and an ecosystem that's somewhat flexible to be able to ingest data and persist data in faster ways, and to be able to respond to those business needs. We certainly don't. I always say that I don't ever want data to be the slow mover, right? To be the hindrance of the business, right? You want to make sure that your data is there and you're ready and you're willing to take on the challenges, and that I always also talk about and believe in the need for data in every single transformation program of the organization. That there should be a data work stream, right? Some data expertise in every single transformation program. That, right, we need to be at the table. We need to be in those discussions so that we can bring value, but so that we can also be prepared and be willing to do the work that's needed in order for the data to be ready for that transformation.
And I think that is also a fact of life for many data leaders, that they sit in the other transformation programs often as somebody who needs to support it, and often, is a big contributor to making them work, So I almost see that the focus is almost bigger on the other transformation programs than the data strategy itself. And I think rightfully so, because you need data for all of these things. But let me take another perspective on it. When we talk about data strategies, would you say that almost all data strategies need to be transformational and lead to transformational programs? Or would you say it depends?
We talked about the need for foundational as well as transformational. So you need to have both. I believe in that. You need to be a part of the discussion on the transformational, but it also comes down to priorities and business value, right? So you need to be able to assess and understand, what's going to deliver the biggest impact to the business, and insert yourself in those transformational programs. The ones that are really, end to end, and the ones that are really going to deliver change, positive change for the organization. Because another side benefit of having a strategy that's, that allows you to be inserted into the transformational programs is that's how you educate and impact the culture. We talk about, data culture programs and data literacy and so forth, data fluency, I like to say, but it doesn't in my opinion, it shouldn't just be a separate program that happens off to the side that you put some resources on, that it is part of the transformational program. And by having data experts involved in that transformation, a big part of their job on the team is to drive change and to educate and to raise awareness of, what the capabilities are, what some of the challenges are, what you're trying to do, right? What the end state is. And that's, to me, just as important as supporting the transformation, right? That's really focusing on the organizational transformation or the softer side of the data work that needs to be done.
Tina, you very often coach, mentor, advise other data leaders. What do you think is really important to do in the first 100 days as a data leader as you come in?
I think it's really important to as I said, ingest the strategic plan of the organization. And as you said, Alex, to understand the current state, because it's not going to be perfect, and then pick some meaningful use cases, right? Pick some areas where you can deliver value early and then scale and repeat from there. That I think it's really important to execute and to deliver and to then communicate the work. Otherwise, it could just perhaps be marginalized, or, people will say, oh, you're not really addressing the issues. You're not really enabling the business. You're not really supporting the plan. And so you become kind of a one-off, right? Or you're kind of pushed to the side. You're not seen as being transformational, right? I mean, you've got to put yourself out there and say, I can help. And I can make sure that the data is available for you. I can ensure that the quality of the data is there, and you become a real trusted partner of the business when you do that. I think the challenge is that sometimes some of the newer data leaders that come into an organization get a bit overwhelmed, right? There's always, so much that needs to be done. So it's being really strategic about how you prioritize the work that needs to be done and attach to the right projects. And that could be, sometimes that's a big lesson learned, right? Is that, you think, oh gosh, this leader on the board is sponsoring this significant initiative, and you attach yourself to it, and then, he's gone, or the money is gone, or the company shifts direction, and you have to sometimes, be really selective and smart about those first few investments of the program, picking the right use cases that are going to be, data heavy, but are also going to deliver, significant value and be important in, presenting the capabilities up to the board, right? Up to the executives. They've got to see it as, okay, they did some really great work and they really were, super helpful and as an enabler. And so let's give them some more projects to do, right? Let's give them some more funding. But I think it's really very much you've got to prove it, unfortunately, up front, particularly because this, the CDO role or the CDAO role is so new and people aren't quite sure, right? How does it fit and how does it align within the organizational structure? And what is it that you're responsible, especially if there's a chief digital officer or a head of IT or a COO, it gets a little bit murky. And so the more that you can, push away that mud and say, no, here's the clear path, I think that the better positioned you'll be.
And so what would you say is a good way to engage the board? And how fast should you do that? What should you talk about? How do you communicate? What are your learnings? I mean, we all made learnings, but I think you had many.
I love the idea of telling stories. And one of, I think, the best ways to do that is to, position a scenario and say, here's how the scenario would break down if the data wasn't there. And then kind of, the lights go on. If you were to say, okay, I want to move into, let's say, I want to make my manufacturing processes more lean. And I want to get more transparency onto what's happening on the shop floor, right? Okay, so can you tell a story around that? And can you say, well, okay, so what happens if I don't have all the right data that I need to run that process? What breaks down? What would happen? The worst case scenario. And then the leader might then say, oh, okay, I get it now, right? Because you've got to be able to translate the data needs and the data capabilities into the business. So you have to really listen and understand the business processes and then be able to articulate it back to that leader with a way to tell the story, right? And have him, envision or her envision, what that end state could be. And if it wasn't there, if I didn't have the data or the data was of really poor quality, this is the worst case that can happen. And sometimes painting a picture of that worst case is when you get those aha moments. I had one of our customers who we went through an exercise to dissect a process and data. And he took us in a significantly different direction than we had scripted, which made us really look at the problem in a different way. It was through the lens of the end consumer. So he had to say, like, no, put yourself in their position. They want to buy this product. And, and of course we started to talk about the data and the process, but it was really very easy if you took it from that point of view to tell that story, right? And to see it, because it's so relatable. And I think that's more important. I had another chief data officer, and she's really focusing on standardization and coming up with a consistent data model and set of definitions across their organization, because her organization is huge and global, and they grew through acquisitions, so they have all kinds of different systems and terminologies. But my guidance to her was, don't just focus on that. You could spend months, years trying to define some basic standards, particularly the difficult ones like what's a customer, right? I mean, you could go through a tremendous amount of debate and discussion around that, which can really be helpful, but that can't be just the one thing that you focus on and that you prioritize. You'll get down a rat hole, right? And I had to kind of lift her up a little bit and say, okay, you can still do that work that you think is so important, but why don't you also try and find another area of the business that needs your attention? Right. And then you can do both, build those capabilities, right, as a part of a larger transformation. And she latched on to a really cool AI project that needed a lot of historical data. And, now they're celebrating. So.
Well, and I think that is a powerful story, because you can choose the big mountains, the highest mountains on the earth, and there are a lot of big mountains, and a lot of them are quite under the water, so you only see the tip of the iceberg. Or you can, choose some of these smaller mountains that maybe look even bigger than the big ones under the water. So yeah. I think selecting a good balance out of them, choosing a few things that are maybe going a bit deeper onto the foundational side, and some that really give you some tangible business results quite fast. I think having that right mix is important.
Right. And then communicating it. You can have the right mix, but if you aren't relating that to the business, if you aren't presenting at the board level, if you aren't getting the meetings with the CEO to be able to share and talk about what you're doing side by side, which is the best way to do it, right? With the business leaders saying, yes, this was a partnership. This was a team approach, right? I think then you're really getting some traction. But you can't forget that, your job as a data leader is also a communicator, a storyteller. Right, and you have to be able to present it at every opportunity that you can.
Let's talk about, value communication, and maybe one question that I would have to you: when do you need to quantify the value?
What do you need to quantify?
When do you need to quantify value? Because a lot of your examples are storytelling, the value storytelling. Mm-hmm. But do you think there are moments where it's really important to quantify the value of what you do as a data leader?
It sort of depends on your sponsorship and your relationship to the board, and if they have trust, and if you're able to do your work with just qualitative metrics. But yes, many times, particularly in the finance arena, right, they want to be able to understand value from a numbers perspective. And we're data people, so of course we've got to feel comfortable with the numbers. I like to go through an example of doing as-is analysis, and then being able to predict the to-be, and to be able to quantify the costs associated with data management, data manipulation, data operation. And that's not that difficult to do. Sometimes people say, oh, I can't do that. I'm like, yes, you can. You can do activity-based costing, which we learned as consultants or in graduate school. You can do that to be able to set a baseline and then be able to demonstrate, right, operational savings, cost avoidance from that. My guidance is always, be super conservative with your numbers. You can present numbers, but be super conservative. Don't ever overinflate, because that, I think, particularly on the data side, because it is a bit subjective, that, your executives might not appreciate, right, a number that is not as close to accuracy and conservatism as possible. So I always say, be very simple with the KPIs, pick a few meaningful ones, baseline them, right? Understand the costs and the cost savings that you can attain. And then you've got to track progress, right? And be realistic about when you think, right, you're going to be able to show real value to the organization.
Wonderful. And so you're embarking on this journey of, data strategy, implementation, transformation. You run this program, maybe you run a series of projects to implement.
You got lots of gray hair, and
you got lots of gray hair.
Lots of little sweet.
And you convinced everyone that this is great, and everyone should follow this path through your value case. What can possibly go wrong in such a journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could give up, right? You could run out of steam and say, okay, I can't do this, right? I always believe in kind of, surrounding yourself with people who are just as passionate about the topic as you are to help lift you up. And hopefully you have mentors and sponsors
in the
that
dark
give you
times,
support.
during the dark times.
Right, because it can be a tough job. But you could also have, your sponsor leaves, right? I've seen companies that, run through COOs and CEOs, every couple of years. That must be really difficult, right? For the leaders, for the second level leaders to stick around, right? And to see that the strategic direction doesn't change with every new person that revolves in through the door.
And it's about the relationships that you have to build. It takes quite a while to build that relationship with a board member. If they change frequently, that's quite.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the number one skill of a successful data leader is the ability to influence. I talked about storytelling and communication, but really it's also about influencing. And it's difficult to influence when you have, significant amount of change. And frankly, that might be the time for you to say, okay, is this a fit for me, right? Organizationally. I think that is a, tough lesson to learn, but one to consider, particularly if it's, recurring, right? New leaders are coming through, repeatedly. I also think it can be that, budgets. So if you aim to do a few use cases and they require a significant amount of resources, that can be that's tough, right? You run the risk of having those resources cut or lack of funding, in the middle of a project, right? Without really having had the chance and time to deliver. So I think that's, kind of an aha moment, is to really pay attention to, how you set up your resources. And to be able to do, to be agile and to demonstrate proof of value as early as you can with as limited resources as you can.
One thing that I have seen quite a bit is in the AI space. So when you implement AI products, what sometimes can happen is that an AI product needs to be operational where the business is, inside the business process, to bring value. Either it's customer facing, or maybe it runs inside your product, like a car. I used to work for a car manufacturer, so you want to have some algorithms even inside your product, or it's simply in your financial processes or somewhere else. And what if the people responsible for these processes simply refuse to use your algorithms? You spend so much time, so much investment, so much R&D, and it's really a good algorithm, and and it can do the job, but people simply are refusing to use it. And they find all the excuses in the world to refute that, to say, hey, this is not working because X, Y, Z. And so that is, I think, also where you have a bit of that transformational journey, where I think there are some, probably some good lessons learned in involving people early, making them feel the owners of these algorithms and not, the data scientists and things like that. And I think that becomes very important as we move, a lot of businesses these days explore how they can leverage generative AI, how they can leverage a lot of the new, I would say, models that are out there and the APIs that are out there. And I think that can be, that can work very well when the business is part of that journey and they want to do that.
Yeah. So I mean, it can't be in a vacuum, right? You can't go off and develop, data capabilities in a vacuum. You can't go in and say, oh, I think this would be a nice report, but not have any business, right? This is kind of this connection between the business challenges and the use cases and what you're developing and delivering. There's got to be this synergy there, this collaboration. And you're right, involving them early. And to me, it's also about getting the right sponsor, right? Who's willing to stand side by side with you to say, yes, we did this together, right? This is a joint initiative. This is a business transformation with the support of the data team, right? And sometimes I see data leaders and they're like, well, it's my project. It's my transformation. It's my strategy. And really that is, a recipe for disaster. It's not, it's the businesses, right? It's the organization. It's much bigger than one team. Even if it's, just not just the data team, these transformational projects are multifaceted, right? And they're going to involve lots of different teams. And it's got to be a collaboration. Yes, you can have some influence. Yes, you can bring some expertise. You can challenge, but it's got to be, a joint effort and presented jointly up to the executives so they see it as, right, as a group, not just a singular person.
Wonderful. So tell me, Tina, what would you say is your number one advice to other data and AI leaders, when they embark on these data strategy journeys, transformational programs?
Make sure the work you're doing is relevant to the organization. Be transparent and communicate really well. Surround yourself with others who feel just as passionate as you do, who understand the challenges and are willing to stand beside you and hold your hand and give you some advice and guidance. Don't be afraid to ask for that advice and guidance. And to try as best as you can to keep the work that you're doing simple, right? I think sometimes it can be, it's a complex world, right? I mean, there's a lot of change going on, and to choose wisely, but also choose what you can deliver value on early. I think that, kind of keeping it simple and manageable is good advice.
Very good. Excellent advice. I think that is worth a lot. And I think there were a lot of, that was not only one advice, there was a package. That was a package full of advice.
It sort of depends on the situation, right? I hate to say the consulting answer again, but you never know what those organizational challenges are, what the cultural challenges are, and what maybe even the technology challenges are. So it's, there's not necessarily just one clear answer, but I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other. And that's why the Masterclass and podcasts like this and building, I think our data community is something really special, because we have a chance to learn from each other and support each other. And that's one of the reasons why I love the work so much, is because I've developed some meaningful relationships, been able to help and to provide some guidance and support. But I also celebrate the successes. So, it's great to see that there are some really successful transformational programs happening out there. And I love to see that and celebrate and promote the work that others are doing.
Great. Wow, so many topics that we covered on transformation. That was, as I mentioned, a full package of advice from Tina. And I want to round this up with a topic that is also dear to my heart, which is, getting more female talent into data and AI, and also into data and AI leadership positions. And I know you've been deeply involved in women in tech and data. What have you learned in this work? What drives you there, and what have you learned?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super passionate about helping future generations find that they can be capable and successful leaders in the data and AI space. It's such a challenge for women. We see this statistic around young girls who are around the teenage years, who've really liked math and science, all of a sudden start to drop off and you choose a career path or a professional direction in a completely different way. And that's really concerning that we as a society are doing something wrong, where we're not giving young girls the same type of support and confidence that we're giving to the boys. So I think that's an important consideration, that we've got to take care of our youth, and we've got to instill the opportunities to girls when they're young. Otherwise, we will have missed it, and they will have gotten a completely different path. We also have to respect and encourage women who are coming back into the workforce to explore careers in data and AI and analytics, data science, etc., that there's an opportunity to apply the skills that they have, their business skills, their work ethic, right? You can apply that and have a few courses. There are lots of open courses there that people can reskill and come back into the workforce after, taking a break for whatever reason, and be successful. And I see that also as a huge opportunity for, people in different levels of their life. When they're going down the path of life, they can take different paths. I think that we also have a responsibility to educate and to make people aware of the different types of career possibilities that we have in the data and AI space. That it's not just about coding, that there's project management and change management and creativity, right? And science. And there's, so many different facets of a career in data and analytics and AI, that there's something for every woman out there if they were to apply themselves. And so we've got to educate them on all these different possibilities, and maybe change the mindset a bit around, how they can build a successful career, and that it's not that difficult. You can get started, right? It's not too late. And then we also have to, continue to work hard with our leadership to have them value and appreciate diversity and inclusion, not just as a goal, but actively developing and hiring and supporting, mentoring, sponsoring women in their organizations.
And having the KPIs in place for that.
Yes, KPIs are great. But actually, do the work, right? Do the work that's needed, right? So, and frankly, it's quite a lot of it is educating male managers on how to support, diverse teams, how to, create programs where people feel that they belong to a team or to an organization, right? It's inclusivity as well as diversity. So there's a lot we still need to do. But programs like Women in Big Data and Women in Tech, it's a great way for us to get involved. And we have, opportunities for people to volunteer, to be mentors, to be sponsors, to give presentations, to tell their stories. So I think we're making a difference. I hope we're making a difference. Yeah.
I think you are, and I think you're a big role models to a lot of younger professionals that are starting off a career or in the middle of a career.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of us out there who are willing to give our time and talent to these types of programs, which is great. Like I said, I think it's a great community, and I see a lot of people are getting involved in the effort, which is great to see.
Fabulous. This was an amazing podcast episode, Tina. If people want to see you live on stage, we have you also as our master coach in our Data and AI Strategy Masterclass on the 29th of February, where you will also share some more of these lessons learned and secrets in transformations, because I'm sure we could have talked for another 3 or 4 hours about that. Thank you so much, Tina.
Yeah, my pleasure.
With us.
All the best.
Thank you.
Boric Data Masterclass, where great data journeys begin.